Oh, principle number 7, moving right along. Principle number 7 is to be resolute in your goal and resilient in your strategy. In other words, be firm in whatever your goal is, but be flexible in how you will approach that goal. So this is really important, that, focus doesn't mean repeating the same thing over and over again. It actually means being willing to change things up, but toward that vision, that goal that you hold dear. So another way I like to say this is that persistence does not mean insistence. Persistence doesn't mean insisting on just one way of doing things. An old saying is, failure is a detour, not a dead-end street. Right? So it's as Steve Jobs once said, fail wisely, learning how to change things up and keep moving toward whatever your goal is. Billie Holiday, the singer, once said, I can't stand to sing the same song the same way 2 nights in succession, let alone 2 years or 10 years. If you can, then it ain't music. It's close order drill or exercise or yodeling or something, not music. Right? So just as we were talking about the Beatles, how they had to keep changing things up to try to please the audience, and that's what made them so great. It's, whether it's music or in business. For example, here in business, A&P, I don't know how many of you have heard of this company. They used to make root beer. They had a supermarket chain. By 1970, they had 111 years in the grocery store business. And what happened was they were competing with Kroger, which had been around for 82 years. This was in the United States. And at that time, customers were saying, we don't want the traditional grocery store anymore. We want a superstore. We want to be able to go and not just buy food, but buy tires and buy lamps and buy pillows. And so this became the genesis of the Walmart model. So Kroger adapted and actually became very successful, continued to be successful because they were willing to change things up and focus on the changing customer needs. Well, A&P, which was called by Forbes the Hermit Kingdom, because Ralph Berger, who was the CEO, insisted on continuing to run A&P exactly the way John Hartford, who was the former CEO and founder, used to run it. So literally, he wore a flower in his jacket, a lapel, which was from the greenhouse of John Hartford's home. What he said once, he said, you can't argue with 100 years of success. Well, A&P went out of business, while Kroger and, of course, Walmart are still around, and we know about them, because they were willing to be flexible in their strategy. You think about this, Microsoft Office, the new, there's every year or two, there's a new version. Why don't we fly Boeing 707s anymore, right? Because there's been 717s and 727s and now 757s. And, it's continually upgrading, continually being resilient in the strategy. Muhammad Ali once said, a man who views the world the same as 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. So we're going to end with a story. So here you have a rock climber. So this story was initially told by Jorge Bucay, an Argentine author. So a rock climber is climbing a mountain face, climbing a large rock, and it's starting to get darker and darker, and he's still climbing, and somehow he ends up falling from the mountain, and the rope gives way, and he's in a free fall. And by some miracle, the rope catches somewhere on the mountain, and he's standing there holding onto the rope. And all he can say to himself is, I am going to survive. I will hold on to this rope. Over and over, I am going to survive. I will hold on to this rope. It's getting darker. It's getting colder. I'm going to survive. I will hold on to this rope. The next day, the villagers come to the mountain face, and they find a rock climber dangling from a rope, frozen to death, 2 feet above the ground. So be resolute in your goal, but resilient in your strategy. Be willing to change things up. And, in the case of the rock climber, I'm going to survive. That's a pretty good goal. I think, most of us probably would also have that goal. But in his case, I'm going to hold on to this rope wasn't the only strategy maybe that he could have considered.